You know what? I've talked about necromancy way too much. I'm sick of it. I want to talk about the opposite. Life. This would be a sick tie-in for Mummy the Resurrection. I probably will use the same thing verbatim when I make a video on it. But no, we're jumping over to Mage so we can talk about the Verbena, who focus on life magic. That's their sphere. The Verbena are druids, witches, old wise men, like that specific vibe. That creepy folk mage who lives in a log cabin like 10 minutes out of the village, like that type of vibe. An immediate one I can point at, just off the top of my head, is the Peller from Witcher 3. Full on Verbena. And they are a vibe if you want to go for that like druid, especially like they can wild shape. That is an ability you can do with life. If you want to do that, boom, this is for you. It's not my vibe. I'm a longtime hater of all nature magic, but you do you. Though before we get right into it, I want to say this channel is brought to you by NordVPN. I am affiliated with them, so in my description, you can click my links if you plan to sign up for NordVPN or NordPass. Use my link, it helps the channel, helps me out. More people that do it, the more offers I can get from Nord down the line, so it's greatly appreciated. Anyways, back to Mage. Now, the Verbena trace their history a long time ago. It's like early human history with a group of people known as the Wick. That's Wick with a Y, by the way. The Wick were like Cain to vampires, but for Mage. It's not an exact one-for-one comparison, since like you're not tracing your lineage directly back to these people, but they were the first people to show like that magical powers that you get while awakening. The difference, they were just stupid powerful. They ruled over humanity, and they also acted more like gods, just being able to shape anything. Reality was malleable specifically for them. And they also just went around doing stuff. They became like cool heroes going on epic quests. They fucked a lot and had kids, so they have some descendants. But they guided humanity from the shadows until one day they disappeared. It's not fully known exactly where they went, but there is another Mage the Ascension concept known as the Pure Ones. A lot of different traditions all just point to this old group of people who were like the first made mages. This is going to be a trend going forward for the Verbena, which I'll get into later. After the Wick, it was the Iduna, who were the descendants of the Wick, and these are all like legendary mage figures. Now, a lot of these figures are claimed by different traditions because everyone's like, yeah, I want Merlin in my group, he was part of my tradition. The Verbena claim that characters like Merlin, Morgan Le Fay, Cersei, Lilith, which I find Lilith funny because she's listed as like an Iduna, but she's also claimed to be one of the Wick. I kind of lean into that. You know, I think the Verbena are cooking here because like reading through a lot of the Book of Nod stuff, I can believe Lilith is a mage. I can believe it. But again, that's them claiming to be kind of the first mages on the field, like their specific traditions. Since really mages quarrel constantly over what is the method of getting ascension, what is the right view on reality. A big view for the Verbena is the idea of life essence and like the energy of things. Magic itself, or quintessence, is literally the life essence of reality, and it's in everything. Quite honestly, that's a pretty broad scope. It's practiced in very like old style ways, a thing I will also get into a lot later, but it's from here that the Verbena claim a bunch of other traditions are sourced from them, as in the Dream Speakers, or the Coven. They specifically claim that it was Verbena offshoots that went down to the Americas and Africa. And then as well, the cult of Dionysus that started popping up, which then later became the cult of ecstasy, also is claimed to be from the Verbena. Is this true? Depends who you ask. Later on, they would develop some beef because I'm gonna jump around the history of this. It's not important to get in the nitty gritty, but this is around like the rise of Greece, Italy, and eventually Rome, because they made two big enemies. The first one is the cult of Mercury, which had a really strong base in Rome itself, and then later on, the Messianic Voices. These were the two precursors to the Order of Hermes and the Celestial Chorus. They had beef with the Verbena because they called the Verbena like pagan barbarians. They weren't a fan. The Messianic Voices did this in a very Christian aspect because they got a big boom when Christianity became like a full thing, and the cult of Mercury was really like, ugh, savages. We do proper magic here, being the dicks that they were. Also, this ties in with history because the Verbena were really tied with the Gaul. If you understand Roman history, you understand what happened there. It sucked pretty bad, but it gets worse because the Inquisition was also a big fan of burning them. A lot of witch burnings throughout history were on Verbena mages because they had that big target on their backs practicing like pagan religions and just being looked down upon by like the Christian forces. Also, don't get it twisted, like the Celestial Chorus and the Order of Hermes, they didn't really like each other at all. It was a triangle war more than like, hey, let's team up on that guy. But more shit piled up on the Verbena because the beginning of the Order of Reason started happening. And oh boy, they also didn't like the Verbena. I don't think anybody did. This didn't get fixed even when they joined the Order of like the 9 Mystic Traditions, where they took up the Seat of Life, and were also still hunted by the Inquisition. Though tempers did fall down a little bit, because at some point you're like, we have a bigger threat, we have the technocracy. It was actually only in like the 1970s that the Verbena had any upside, just any win, because there was a big occultic, esoteric interest boom that happened in the 1970s. This is true. This is actually very true. I'm personally nitpicking a little bit. I think it exploded a lot harder in the 1950s and then the 60s. The books like directly point to 1970s. That is a nitpick. Occultism, esotericism is kind of like my special interest. Shut up, I'll talk about it. But it was in the 1970s that the Verbena, for the first time ever, had a positive number of people joining. People were actually like, oh, okay, I get the vibe. Sick, I'm down. Which their vibe specifically is like the old ways. They are a big fan of older traditions, which like their implements, for example, are all very simplistic, to the point. The more straightforward and less complicated it is, the stronger the magic becomes. These are like broomsticks, wands, cauldrons, ritual knives. For Verbena, they have their own groves. These groves all have a tree, a single tree, that is a representation of the Tree of Life. Just the raw physical manifestation of that concept of like magic, undercurrent, everything, life energy. This tree is stained red with all the rituals that they do. Verbena are totally fine with like sacrifices, either human or animal. However, because of their strong ties to like the idea of life, and they don't really want to hurt things and like cause pain to life, a lot of times these rituals are unto themselves, so they'll like carve runes into their own skin or just do something bloody. Which also, the Verbena have a lot of crossover with Wicca. This is again, my special interest, this type of shit, so sorry. Which it's super clear the actual things pulled to the Verbena from the concepts in Wicca. So I will describe it because I think it makes a stronger picture of who the Verbena are. Which, despite that, Wicca is a hard thing to give a broad definition to because the practice is very personal. I've actually known these number of people who are practicing because Wicca is like the biggest modern pagan religion in the world. And this is not me saying pagan disparagingly, this is just an accurate description of what it is. But beliefs can vary because there are many times godly deities that are put up and like venerated. Oftentimes this is a duology, there's two figures, the horned god and the mother goddess. Other times it's more polytheistic, sometimes it's monotheistic, sometimes it's atheist. A big practice that does stick though is magic, actual spellcraft. Now again, the belief in magic varies because there are people who treat this as like actual spell work, and then there's other people who treat this as like a physical way of manifesting your own goals or ways of self-reflection. Again, I've met people on both spectrums of that. And it's not manifesting as in like, let me summon real quick. It's more like, I'm writing my goals down on a sticky note and putting it on my wall. It's another way of doing that. So yeah, it's a little complicated. I think it is interesting, which are other parallels I'll get into in a second. But I don't know if there's any practicing Wicca in my audience. Feel free to talk about it, because I am coming at it from someone who likes it academically. I personally believe in nothing of the supernatural, but respect it. You do you. A big reason though I went through their history and really focused in on that concept of them practicing the old ways is because I think this paints two pictures based on how you view the Verbena and I guess how nice of a person you are. Because in the like first interpretation I believe you can take, the Verbena are one of the oldest forms of magic practitioners on Earth. They are the source of a lot of things that were later then drawn upon, and there's something to the originator of a practice being really shit on by everyone around. Which makes sense because there's a big focus on like older traditions and things that were practiced a long time ago and have since dropped with the development of the modern world. Something the Verbena don't really like. They're very peak TV rots your brain, get off your phone, go to the woods. There's a saying in the actual Mage 20 book that I'm paraphrasing, but it's you don't know shit about reality until you walk into the woods with like just your clothes on your back. Then there's the more cynical interpretation, which is this is major code. The Verbena are claiming, well, everyone is around them kicking their ass, like, huh, I was the originator though, you come from me, you're a derivative of me. I think it's an understandable perspective for a group that only had their golden age in 1970. Which part is true? Again, the lore is apocryphal, so probably somewhere in the middle. But with that boom in the 70s, the Verbena have been organizing a lot better. One thing is a lot of people that are coming to join the Verbena are women, because the Verbena historically, not even just modern times, like historically, have treated women better, with more respect, and there's just more women in power. These groups are separated into covens. You can be a Verbena all on your own, but it's more likely you group up. These covens can be numbered in like just special numbers, 13, 9, 7, 3, just numbers with importance. And each coven is led by 2 leaders. These 2 leaders are meant to embody the priest and the priestess. Again, this is why I describe Wicca, because it's the concept of the horned god and the mother goddess. That's kind of the vibe they're taking up for their coven. Though, despite the gendered term there being priest and priestess, it actually doesn't really matter what gender you are in becoming one of those leaders. Directly showing from the book, it doesn't really matter what mix of genders people take for those 2 roles. It notes, like, yeah, both leaders can be men, women, transgender people, based as hell, Mage 20th, because, like, the gender's not the point. The point is just embodying a concept and just leading a group, oftentimes much older people. A lot of elder respect, because, like, I think it's really clear, a solid chunk of the vibe for the Verbena are, like, old crone witchcraft. Despite, like, the Nordic representation we get from, like, the Mage 20 book, another great image for the Verbena, the vibe I keep picturing is, like, the classical witch, or literally the Peller from Witcher 3. It's just that's the strong vibe I get from the Verbena. And that vibe I like a lot more. Because, yeah, my bias comes in. I'm not a big fan of, like, druid craft. I've never liked the vibe. So those are the vibes I personally stick on. But the Verbena have a pretty wide range of options because they use the life tree. Life tree is, again, that same concept of everything living is in some way empowered with magic, which is another Wiccan concept. The idea that magic is more like another sense of the human body. It is an element that exists in the world with everything. Life is focused on just anything living, down from like a person, an animal, a virus, like bacteria, like that counts with life. It's just the moment it's not life anymore, it becomes in the matter sphere. But yeah, life is like the way you can transform yourself into a bear if you want a wild shape. You can heal people, you can do a bunch of cool ceremonies to like force evolution. Essentially, do you want to like affect a living thing, like actually magically change it, mess with it, do something? You need some life sphere points. But yeah, overall, like that's the vibe of the Verbena. It's really fun, their specific idea of to the point, very brutalistic, very simple types of ritual craft. Because like, sure, you can do all these funny spell incantations, set up a hyper complicated runic symbol, but you know what has more power in the eyes of the Verbena? Something to the point and something with some emotion into it. As like shows of like passion, high emotion, something that impacts you physically, or I'm also dancing around it slightly, sex magic is a thing for the Verbena. Maybe I can see the point that the cult of ecstasy came from them. But this is again something that comes back to like 1900s rise of esotericism, since good old Aleister Crowley, man, a real freak in the sheets. I don't just mean physically, I also mean magically. Yeah, I think there's a lot of big, interesting vibes you can hit with the Verbena. Like I've kind of been saying, it's not something I would personally play, but the Verbena, honestly, hit that vibe of like Druid, the life sphere, way better than other games. If it came down to it, I am more willing to play a Verbena than I am like a Druid in Pathfinder or D&D. My point being, not my vibe, but if you are a big Verbena fan, I completely understand. I agree. Go off. Do that sick ritual. Hell yeah, man. So yeah, that's it. That's the Verbena. I'd like to shout out my channel members, make all these videos possible. I'm super appreciative. And a huge shout out to my top tier channel members. That being Hazard650, Lucky Finds 23, Pork Chomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much. Means a lot. I greatly appreciate your membership. But yeah, other than that, join NordVPN today using my links. Join my membership, like, comment, subscribe. Do all the typical YouTube things. See ya.